It's 5:16. Now, have a listen to this ALP election ad having a go at Lawrence Springborg.
We start 2009 in the midst of a crisis unlike any we have seen in our lifetime.
We are confronting challenges we never have had to meet before.
We are going through the worst financial crisis in our lifetime.
The most profound economic emergency since the Great Depression.
It's not like the Great Depression. It is not like the austerity. It is not like a war footing. That is absolute nonsense. It is not even a recession.
Authorised by Chisholm, ALP South Brisbane.
Well, there's an ad for the ALP's election campaign, but does it heighten your fears about the economy? Queensland businesses say that ads like this are crushing consumer confidence, and they're calling on our politicians to stay away from such negative talk in their election campaigns. Why? Because they say it's curbing spending and it's bad for business in Queensland. Scott Driscoll is from the Retailers Association. Good afternoon, Scott.
G'day, Trevor.
Scott, you've called this election ad irresponsible. Is it really, or is it just painting a picture of what's going on in the world?
Well, Trevor, it is irresponsible because what you've got there is a number of people who are talking about domestic economies. We're trying to talk about the Queensland economy, and quite honestly, the Queensland economy is in far better shape than certainly a lot of other states in Australia, and certainly much better than the US and the UK.
Despite the fact that the Treasurer, Andrew Fraser, has had to host 3 mini-budgets in the last 9 months, and that the picture has become bleaker with each successive mini-budget?
Look, what we're dealing with, though, is a situation where the facts are very clear. We're not in a recession, and the opposition leaders' comments, which are featured in that ad, are quite right. We're technically not in a recession, and I can tell you that business out there in Queensland, and we've got thousands of members across this state, are working very, very hard to ensure that consumer confidence remains high, they can keep employing their staff, and that we don't actually drift into something that hopefully is avoidable.
So how are these ads hurting businesses in Queensland? Can you actually prove that they are at this stage?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I mean, I'm taking the evidence of people that have been in business for a very long time, who I speak to dozens of them every day, who are saying to me that they are sick to the back teeth of the negativity coming out of state and federal politicians, ministers in both governments. And look, we don't want to see political opportunism creeping into the campaign in Queensland to the extent that it can harm business and harm job prospects. And that's what this particular ad, I fear, does. And I mean, I can say to you that this morning I heard the response from the Queensland Treasurer to what I'm saying on one of your sister ABC stations in Brisbane. He came back and said, and I quote, "Whether or not the economist's definition for the Queensland economy is met is beside the point. This looks and feels like a recession." You know, I mean, is this an episode of The Castle? I mean, is it the vibe, the Constitution, but mainly the vibe? We don't want to see this sort of loose talk out there when people have real mortgages at stake, running real businesses and employing real Queenslanders.
But is it a case that we're just talking ourselves into a recession, or just a reflection of what's happening? And is it inevitable, given the world climate, that even with a relatively healthy economy in Queensland, that we could still find ourselves in a lot of trouble?
I don't think it's inevitable at all. There's no doubt we're on a rough road, but let's not lay down and wait for the truck to come. And that would be a disaster if indeed that is what the current state government is actually suggesting we do. That's not what business is about. That's not what small business, local family-owned businesses are about to do, and they're the people we represent.
So, do you believe then that Queensland can stave off a recession? That even if the rest of the country falls in, that the Queensland economy is strong enough to do it, and that if we remain upbeat about it, that we can work our way through that?
Trevor, definitely. If there's one state in Australia that can do it, it is Queensland, and that is not just being optimistic. That's real economic fundamentals. I mean, in Queensland, we've got very solid background to fall back on. We've actually got the lowest home mortgage rate since the 60s. We've got an overall drop in the cost of living. Even the national projection from the federal government is that 93% of Australians who want jobs will be in jobs at the height of this, at the end of the year come next year. So, I mean, you're going to have 93% of Australians wanting jobs in jobs. And quite honestly, if you're in a job, you're going to be better off than you've probably been for a very long time, as long as the negativity from politicians who are being opportunistic at the moment, it doesn't creep in too far.
But given our dependence on resources to export markets and the fact that Queensland is the tourism capital of Australia, if people aren't coming here, whether it's from overseas destinations or domestically, then is that still a realistic picture to paint?
Well, Trevor, I deal with a lot of independent businesses, retailers predominantly, and they're the people best adapted to being able to shift and move with changing demand. And certainly we've seen, though we might have seen a drop-off, you take tourism, for example, we may have seen a drop-off of international tourism. We're certainly going to see a resurgence of domestic tourism because Australians as well are actually going closer to home and spending their tourist dollars. And we've got to actually build on that. We've got to be flexible. We've got to look at new and positive ways of stimulating the domestic and certainly the Queensland economy. And that's what small business people in this state are doing.
Scott, have you confronted the two major parties over this?
I've certainly made it very well known to both of them that this sort of thing is not acceptable. I've done it this morning with the Treasurer, and I've certainly made it very well known via an email to the opposition leader that he'd be best served staying on the positive side of the ledger as he's already attempted to do.
All right, Scott Driscoll from the Retailers Association. 5:22. This is ABC Coast FM.